Welcome back to the Beyond Jaws podcast. On today's episode, we have Kenzie Horton, who is a shark biologist. She's just about finished her master's. She's talking about her master's, what she wants to do in the future, and growing up, how she wanted to be a marine biologist from when she was really, really young, taking underwater photographs with those underwater cameras that they're like film cameras. They weren't even like digital cameras, and go way back, talking about what it's like to grow up wanting to be a marine biologist in Florida, becoming a marine biologist, working in a bunch of different software packages and doing analysis and field work, really getting into fisheries and shark biology and shark tracking. It's a lot of fun. You're going to love this episode. So let's start the show. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another exciting episode of the Beyond Jaws podcast. I'm your co-host, Andrew Lewin, with my co-host, Dr. David Ebert. Dave, Kenzie Horton's on the program. She's been on How to Protect the Ocean, finally got her on Beyond Jaws. What did you think of I think she's awesome. What did you think of this interview today?
I thought it was wonderful, Andrew. It was great. It was another awesome find on your part. Usually I find the guests and stuff, but she was
TikTokers.
Awesome.
I'm too addicted to TikTok.
Yeah. Well, I talked to her a little bit off air, and that we had some correspondence. I knew who she was a little bit, so I wasn't completely blindsided when you recommended her. But no, she's another one of these really outstanding young, researchers, shark people is coming up, and she's kind of a bit diversified in what she does with both trying to do the science, work different jobs, learn different skills. It was wonderful. It was a wonderful interview. I really hope people enjoyed it today. It was just a
she was great.
Really neat thing. And so hopefully we had a nice chat with her both before and after the show, and she's really got her stuff together, and I'm looking for big things from her, and hope people enjoy the show here following her stuff.
Absolutely. This is like a story of tenacity and making sure, knowing what she wanted to do as she was young and following it all the way through, no matter what, changes in the way things are going now as she's graduating, she's coming up, taking a gap year, trying to figure out what she wants to do and which avenue she wants to go in, which I think is fantastic. Looking to do a PhD in the future. I just think it's a great interview, and there's lots of stuff that if you want to be a shark biologist, you want to be a shark scientist, conservationist, fisheries biologist, this is the episode that you want to listen to. So here's Kenzie Horton talking about her career so far, and lots to come, I'm sure, in this interview. Enjoy, and we'll talk to you after. Hey, Kenzie, welcome to the Beyond Jaws podcast. Are you ready to talk about sharks and fisheries and all that wonderful stuff?
Yes, I'm so excited to be here.
Well,
love it.
Well, I want to welcome everyone to the Beyond Jaws podcast, where we have another outstanding early career guest today. We have Kenzie Horton, who goes by Kenzie, is our special guest, and she kind of almost is there with her master's degree from Jacksonville University. We'll kind of consider, she's waiting on a final edit or two, but we'll consider she's good for that. Her research focus was on actually the movement of white sharks overwintering off the Carolinas. I'd be interested to hear that. And Kenzie has also had a deep connection with the ocean, where she spent her whole life working towards wanting to become a marine biologist from a very early age. She's a member of the American Elasmobranch Society, the Phi Kappa Phi Honors Society, the American Fisheries Society, and she's presented at several professional conferences, including the White Shark Global Conference in Australia in 2023. She holds certifications in first aid, CPR, boater's license from the Coast Guard. She's a NAUI certified open water diver. In her educational professional career to date, she's developed such a love of education outreach that she inspired her to start her own TikTok channel. She presently works for the Florida Wildlife Research Institute, but is looking into a PhD program. So if there's any of our academic Sharky friends out there looking for a fantastic graduate student, you might want to talk to Kenzie after hearing this podcast, especially after hearing this podcast. And certainly feel free to hit up Andrew and I, as well as Kenzie, for a recommendation. So as we mentioned, she works for the Florida Research Institute. She did her marine biology degree at the University of South Florida, and she's just about there with her master's from Jacksonville University. And Kenzie, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Good. So I'll ask you what we always ask our guests the first question. How did you get interested in marine biology and sharks and that?
It's been a long journey. So it really started off as when I was really young. My family used to take me down to the Keys, and it was like a family vacation we take every year. And we'd always make stops along the way. We'd stop at Robbie's and go feed the tarpon. And, my dad would show me how to feed them. And I was always just so mesmerized by how big these fish got and how powerful they were. And then we make our way down to the to Key West. And every year we go snorkeling. There's these 3 rock formations at this beach right off of the Navy base in Key West. And I would always get my goggles. And this is right when the disposable underwater cameras were popular.
Yes.
Which I loved. So I would go and we would buy packs. I'd basically save up and I would buy a pack of these things. And I'd go and I'd take a ton of pictures. And I was always excited as I always wanted to see all the fish and the parrotfish. And there was just so much life off these rocks. And we'd come back and I'd get them developed. And over the years, I wanted to learn more about what I was seeing. And so one year, I bought a fish identification book. And that one actually started with, we were after the dry tortugas. And I swam down and I saw my first hogfish. And it opened its mouth at me. And back then, I thought it was yawning. I didn't know what else it was doing. But it opened its mouth and they have such wide, long mouths. It scared me, and I saw these giant teeth, their canines, and I came up and I was screaming. My mom was freaking out, and she was trying to calm me down and telling me, no, don't worry. It's probably just skin. It's not teeth. She knew what it was, but she didn't want me to panic. So on that same trip, we went back to shore and we were walking by one of those little gift shops, and I went and I bought my first fish ID book. And after that, I started taking all the disposable camera pictures and trying to play the matching game of what I saw in the water to what I saw in the book. And I came across the hogfish, and I knew they were teeth. And I was flipping through and I found it, and I was like, see, I told you it was teeth. It was not whatever you called it. So it became like a game where I had to prove my parents wrong, or I would just go and just tell them. I would take the picture year after year and add to the book. And then I would go and just give them a lecture on the fish. Basically, you're just reading off the page or see what I could remember. And so when we were snorkeling, I'd come up to the surface and I'd be like, all right, well, there's a blue parrotfish here. They have a beak, and you can hear them, eating off the rocks and the corals. I would just go on and on and on. And so from an early age, back then, I didn't realize that was kind of the beginning of my career and the journey. But my parents definitely saw it. And over the years, I think they saw that drive and that passion and how much I love the ocean. So they kind of let me foster that. And they were always exposing me to the ocean in different, aquariums and research centers. They were always I did everything that was marine based. So from a very young age, it was just basically trying to prove my parents wrong and ID all the fish that I saw. And then it just kind of progressed as I got older.
Did you have any particular interest? Was it just fish in general, or marine life, or I guess sort of when did sharks kind of get into the picture a little bit?
So sharks kind of came up, of course. With it being July and it being on Nat Geo Shark Fest, and we got Shark Week on Discovery. Shark Week was a huge deal back then, and I remember watching it. And every year I waited. I counted down to the days. And I think they were still, I felt like they were so misunderstood. I spent so much time in the water, and I would see them and, never had any bad interactions. And so I was, seeing the stigma around them. And, at a young age, people would see sharks in the water, and they'd always be fearful. It was always this negative talk. And I was always so excited. I was like, they're so amazing. And as I got older, I saw how important they were to the oceans. So it kind of just evolved. But to be honest, it really started off just snorkeling and seeing them in the ocean and just having a personal interaction with them. And then as I watched, the Shark Week shows, and then when Nat Geo came up with Shark Fest, it just kind of evolved into that where, I loved all the shows. Now, the shows can be interesting.
Yeah.
So, some are more educational, and some you can tell are just entertainment purposes, and they are goofy. But people love them. And I always loved how people got so excited around them. Everyone, even for now, the month of July, it's Shark Week. Everything is shark related. And I love it because people are excited about it. People are excited to hear about it. I get asked tons of questions, and I always just love when people are more curious rather than fearful. So it started kind of young at watching those shows.
So what happened? Would your parents obviously encouraged it, so there was never any moment where they were thinking like, oh no, don't worry, she'll grow out of this and get a real job. They were.
There may have been. I think they know that I'm pretty stubborn, and once I kind of set my goal, that's it. They definitely had said, they were very supportive, but they always said, make sure you have backup plans. Like if this is not what you end up doing, that's okay. They were just letting me know that if the marine science route didn't work, or if I changed my mind later on, that was okay. But they know me too well. And once I had my heart set, this was it.
Yeah.
Did you ever waver, like in school? Did you ever like find like a different, maybe even, frogs or birds or anything like that caught your eye just because you were in the wild, like in nature so much? Did you ever waver and be like, maybe I won't do a marine biology. Maybe I'll do something else?
I kind of I was very briefly going like the veterinary route. I was watching all like the shows and like, obviously like I watched like the Crocodile Hunter, and there was all like these vet shows and more the exotic vets. So I kind of was going that route. I was interested, but I always just kind of leaned and I always just navigated towards, the marine science stuff. I just kind of kept going back. And so I decided that, that's the route. And if I know there's a lot of people that are veterinarians that do a lot of marine science stuff, so there is a lot of crossover, and I didn't know that back then. Now I do see it, but back then I thought it was you were a vet and solely a vet, and then you were a marine scientist, and they were two separate things. But now I know that they can be very much one and the same.
Did you ever have any counselors like in high school or anything kind of like ask you if you had a plan B as well when you told them you're going to do marine biology?
I had several teachers. I had people in college. I had people in internships in college. I had lots of people my entire life that just said, hey, this is a tough field. Like everyone, especially growing up in Florida, everyone wants to be a marine biologist. And you're around it and everyone says, oh, well, that's what everyone says they want to do. So you'll find something else. And I was like, no, this is what I want. But I definitely had a lot of people that were trying to steer me out of it. They were like, you're never going to make a lot of money. And I was like, if I can pay my bills, that's fine. To be honest, I wanted to do something that I loved and I had fun. That like when I'm getting up at 3 a.m. to go offshore, I'm excited to get up at 3 a.m. to go offshore. I'm not getting up at 3 a.m. to go sit in an office where I might be miserable. So I kind of weighed those pros and cons. But yeah, there's been a lot of people throughout my entire life and in my career that have, even to this day, have tried to steer me out of it.
So what kept you following that career? Like, were there successes along the way? Like you got good mark and maybe a class that would kind of drive you more, or was it just more of I knew the end game. I want to be a marine biologist. I want to work in the field. I want to go back and forth between field and office and lab and that kind of stuff. Like, or was there things that kind of helped you along the way in college or even in high school?
I would say a mix of both. It was always something I was always drawn towards. If I was reading books, they were always marine science books, fish ID books. I was always going to the water and trying to learn more. I read every sign at the aquarium. I was trying to be like the star guest at aquariums, reading every sign that was put out. I was asking questions to the aquarists and everything. But then I always did really well in all the biology classes, and, getting into college, you have like those general courses, and those were, I was just kind of bored. And it wasn't until we started getting into like the more marine science core classes where I felt like I was really excelling and I was really enjoying the classes. So that kind of helped me along the way, where I knew I wanted to do marine science, but it was kind of like a confirmation when I was doing well. And even during tough courses, I still enjoyed the learning process. And, even if I didn't do well on a test, like I still enjoyed the entire process and knew where I went wrong. So it was a mix of both, but I've just always just kind of had my eyes set on the end goal.
Nice.
How'd you happen to pick like University of South Florida for your undergraduate?
Two reasons. It was kind of close to home. So I'm from Orlando. So it was close to home. I spent a lot of time in Tampa growing up. So I was very familiar with the area. I had family over there. I was a little scared about going too far from home. But also being in Florida, I had so much at my fingertips for marine science. And there was a professor there that I had heard that worked with sharks, Dr. Phil Motta. And I really wanted to work with him. And I I felt so bad for him. So I went to orientation, and they had some people from the biology club that was there, and I was speaking with them, and they told me about him a little bit more, and they said, yeah, he doesn't really take students that often, and if he does, it's not until your junior year. You have to take all of his courses. It was very strict to get into his lab, and I remember standing there going, I'm going to get in his lab. I'm going to do it. And from day one, literally week one of my freshman year, I walked to his office. I was terrified. I was shaking. I walked to his office and I knocked on his door and I said, hi, you don't know who I am. I'm a freshman. This is my first week. I was like, I'm very interested in shark research and I would love to work in your lab. What do I need to do? Like, I've heard people say I need to do things, but from you, what do I need to do to work in your lab? And he gave me a long list of things. And then every few weeks, I'd kind of walk in and be like, if you ever need a volunteer, I'm offering, I can just help out another student. I can help out the grad students. Yeah. I can clean your lab. I'll literally wash, dissection tools or petri dishes. So I finally got in later on. I actually got in my sophomore year, but I chose that because I really wanted to work with him. And then it ended up being like a drive of mine to work in his lab.
Oh, good. So you obviously eventually did get into his lab.
I did. Yeah. I helped out an undergrad. He was doing strike speed on blue crabs. So I was learning high speed cameras and I was in there every week and it was a fun project. And after being in there for about a semester or so, he offered me a position in his lab. So I started, I think, officially my junior year, but I was already volunteering as a sophomore. But I was very excited when he offered the position.
Did you get to do much with sharks when you got into the lab?
It was more dead sharks. I did shark skin work, so it was still fun. I did goblet cell abundance and presence in 4 different elasmobranchs. So I did a short fin mako, a great hammerhead, a nurse shark, and a clear nose skate. So I just compared the goblet cell abundance, and I basically just worked on histology, got in contact with the health center. They had like Moffitt. We had a partnership with them where I could send all the histology slides to them, and they would stain them and deliver them back. So I got a chance to understand the histology part of things. But yeah, most of my time was either sitting in the microscope, moving micron over micron, snapping a picture and moving a little over and snapping a picture and doing it over and over again. So we had, I think, 16 different places on the body that we were taking these pictures from. And I did that for, 4 different species. And if we had multiple individuals, I would do them for multiple individuals. So it was a lot of time sitting at a microscope. And then occasionally we would get some sharks that were donated. So I would help kind of work those up. But it was mostly time just at the microscope. But it was a very neat project. And I learned a lot from it.
Yeah. So when you went through there, got your degree eventually there. And then, so what was you took if I recall, you said you took a bit of a gap after that?
I did. I didn't go straight into grad school. I was worried that I made the wrong decision for a while. People always say, like, once you're out, you're never coming back in. And I immediately started applying for jobs, and I was applying for Fish and Wildlife, and I was not even hearing back for interviews. I was applying for aquariums, and I was starting to get a little discouraged. But to be honest, I was just bartending at the time. It was a great job that I could kind of work a schedule around. So if I needed to go volunteer somewhere or if I wanted to go check out different universities, I had a little bit more flexibility of my schedule and I made decent money. So I bartended for 2 years while I just actively applied to everything. And it was discouraging after, for a while. But I did have a friend, Jordy, who was working in the fisheries dependent monitoring at FWC. And she had let me know that they were looking for some volunteers in her department and then the independent monitoring group, which is the one I ended up working in. And so I reached out to them and I got a volunteer position and I volunteered once or twice a week, sometimes 3 times a week. If I had time, I told them, I was like, you can put me in the office, you can put me in the lab, put me on the boat. I just want to do something. Yeah. I miss it. And then after volunteering, I believe I started in July. I had an interview in December and I was officially employed by them in January of 2019. Nice. So I took basically 2-ish years. I graduated December 2016. So it's about 2 full years where I was actively searching for a job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you finally get in, okay, maybe not, I don't know if you'd call it your dream job, but it was a job kind of in the field. And how did it, at what point did you decide you're going to go to graduate school?
Yeah, I mean, it was actually a place I'd always wanted to work when I was at USF because they had so the FWC office is on University of South Florida's St. Pete campus. So I always saw it. So I was always looking at it and I was
Nice.
like, that'd be so
Yeah.
great to work there. I saw their boats and they were always constantly going out. So it was definitely a place I really wanted to work. And I really enjoyed my time there. But it was during COVID. So took the 2 years working at FWC. And then during COVID, I was just, I'd work from home and then sit around because there was nothing we could do. I mean, we were in
Right.
quarantine.
Yeah.
And I thought this is no better time to start studying for the GRE. I have all the time in the world to do this, and I might as well just do this now and apply for grad schools and hope, in hopes that things would start at least slowly opening back up after that. So I just started studying for the GRE, spent like 4 hours a day with the GRE book and spent about 6 months studying and then took the test. Did decent enough. I do not do well on standardized tests. I will be honest on that one.
Nobody does. Nobody does.
No, and it's always discouraging. 'Cause I'm like, I studied so hard. And I know these things, but I always the scores are just never what I want it to be. But I do really well at a test, for like in class, fine. But standardized tests just are not my strong suit. But I did well. I did decent, and I started applying for schools. And I was actually we were having a meeting, and there's a couple of us at work that are all like shark people. So we were having a meeting like at lunchtime. We were all sitting there just trying to chat about sharks, and we had like all of our shark like shirts on and all the stuff in the background. And I don't know what I heard something like someone said Jacksonville, and they were talking about some of the sharks, and I couldn't remember what pieces fit together. But afterwards I started just Googling. I was like Jacksonville and sharks, and Jacksonville University popped up, and I saw they had the partnership with OSearch. And I had wanted to work with OSearch for a very long time because I used to watch Offshore Adventures with my dad on Saturday mornings. So it was like what we would do. And it was with Chris and Brett. And my dad was like, wouldn't it be cool to work with them one day? Like that could be your job where you could be on a boat fishing and, tagging sharks. And then when they started evolving into OSearch in like, I think 2007, I followed their progression through all the shows and online. And so when I saw they had a partnership, I was like, wow, this is my shot. This is my chance to like accomplish like this dream that I've had for a while to like, be a marine scientist, work with sharks, work with white sharks, which is, an exciting species to work with. And then I was like, it's not too far from home. And it was great because an FWC office is also on JU's campus. So I have been able to work full time as well as going to grad school full time because everything is in the same building.
That's perfect.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So you got in there and did you? Okay, so once you got into grad school there, did you know when you got in that you were going to be working on white sharks or?
I didn't. So JU has a little different setup. So you get accepted into the grad program, but you have like your first to a little bit of your second semester where you can meet with professors and try to brainstorm some ideas. They want you to come in with some questions, but you have some time to kind of work with them to see who's taking students and what type of question you can ask and like what type of research you can do. But I had my eyes set, and being stubborn, I was like, I'm going to do this. So again, my advisor, Brian Franks, day one, I immediately walked up, introduced myself, and, just said, I basically, instead of saying, I like sharks, which I have been told for, many years that don't say that. You want to show up with a question.
Sharks. That's
all. We all like sharks.
That.
Yeah, like it's great, but it's like, okay, well, what about sharks? What interests you about them? And so during my time, as I was applying for grad schools and I was looking for advisors, I was really trying to think of questions. And with OSearch, I loved the telemetry and movement side of things, and I really wanted to understand more of their movement. So I kind of approached it in that way of just, talking about, I really wanted to focus on movements. Also with my work, a lot of my work is very field heavy, and I didn't have a lot of data analysis side. And I knew if I wanted to progress in both work and anything else, I would need to have both. So I also approached it as I wanted a data heavy project. And with OSearch, they only go out on, expeditions periodically throughout the year, depending on where the white sharks are. So I knew that this particular master's project wouldn't be field heavy, which would be great with work, but it would also give me that data analysis side that I kind of needed to like make myself a little more balanced.
Mm-hmm.
So did you actually get out to do some tagging on the white sharks?
I did, yeah. So after my first semester, by my second semester, Brian did offer me the position in his lab, and again, I was very excited. I could not believe it. Yeah, I think it was April or March 2022. I went out on the first expedition. He wasn't able to make it, so I flew to Charleston by myself and took an Uber to the ship. And I walked up, and I remember just being like, "What am I doing? I don't know anyone on this ship. I don't know what's going on." And I'm just going to walk up and be like, "Hi, I'm Kenzie, one of Brian's students. I'm here, to help out." So it was a little nerve wracking, walking up to something that I had been following since childhood. And, I'm meeting these people, and this is a grad school project. I'm representing, myself, my advisor, my lab, the college. So it was a little nerve wracking, to be honest, but I was I was trying to play it cool most of the time. I was like, I was shaking, but I was, trying to act like, everything's fine.
I know this.
Yeah. Like, I know this. I'm supposed to be here. But everyone was so welcoming. And that was my first expedition. We fished for days, and the weather was not so great. We fished all the way from Charleston. We came all the way down off of Jacksonville. And then on the last few days, we had a weather pocket that was moving. So we kind of moved back north off the Outer Banks. And there were two juvenile, smaller white sharks circling the boat. And we were able, at the last hour, so I was supposed to leave the boat at 4 just for like the crew switch. At 3:00, we got a shark on. And so I was able to, I didn't really have a whole lot of experience working with like larger sharks like that. I had some experience working with smaller sharks from like internships in the past. I just basically helped out. I was just there like to hold supplies, hold tools, I was observing and watching, but I got to there's a picture right up here. I know you can't see it for like the audio purposes, but like I do have a picture of me tagging and touching my first white shark and being able to work it up for her. So her name's Crystal. And I've been following her. So that was very exciting. And then since then, I've been a part of the tagging process for 4 more sharks. And I was able to do my first acoustic surgery.
Oh, wow.
I was supervised by their chief vet, Dr. Harley Newton. We worked through it, and she was there the whole time, but she walked me through it, and I was able to do my first acoustic surgery on a white shark. So that was very exciting. To be a part of the tagging process, and like also know that like the tag that I am placing on this animal, I will use for my it was like all full circle moment for me. So it was very surreal. And then like watching the shark swim off, knowing that like we had years of data to collect from her.
Yeah.
So and you could go on. You can follow this. You've been following the shark for years now.
She was tagged in 2023. Yeah. So, she doesn't ping very often. It's Anne Bonny. So if you go on the shark tracker, that's the shark that I did the acoustic tag on.
Cool.
So
now, was this the only time were able to actually get out at sea with them and work with them,
I've been out 4 times now.
Cool.
We only caught sharks on 2 of those. So the first expedition, we got 1, the second one, we got 4. And then the third one I went off, we didn't get any. It was just, the weather was really bad. We were just we'd seen them, but they just no luck. And then I did I did a day trip or 2 with them when they were doing some day trips off of Jacksonville this spring.
Okay. And now, so this ended up being like the basis for your thesis, and you were looking at their overwintering patterns off the Carolinas.
Yeah. So, for those that don't know, the white sharks population in the Western North Atlantic, they range from Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, Canada, all along the eastern seaboard into the Gulf of Mexico, or I'm not going to say the other one.
Gulf of Mexico.
Gulf of Mexico.
Yeah. So they overwinter from the Carolinas into the Gulf. And that's the area that we know the least about them. We have a lot of research going on in that northern portion. But their overwintering region is still being kind of looked at. We know that there's a secondary nursery habitat there. We know that they use that area, but like, how are they using it? Are there hotspots? Are they targeting certain areas? How many go into the Gulf? We just don't really know that yet. And there's a couple projects coming out that's looking at how many of the tagged white sharks are going into and using the Gulf. How many are just staying in the Carolinas, which is where my project came in. I initially wanted to do the entire overwintering, but that was turning into a PhD, which I would have loved to have done. But I was told, reel it back in.
Yes.
Remember the scope of your project. This is a master's degree. You have to, And it's so hard. I mean, I know I'm not alone in
100%.
this, where you start doing some research and you have that question, and the next thing you know, you have 100 questions you want to ask, and you have to be like, all right, I need to just hone it back in. What's the main question? How do I answer this main question? And then from there, we can do all these tangent questions.
I think in Jacksonville only has a master's degree. They don't have a PhD program. Is that correct?
No, it's just master's. Otherwise, I would have done the PhD route.
Yeah. Moss Landing's like that as well.
Yeah. Which is unfortunate, but I was just looking at their movements off the Carolinas. We use 3 different tag types. So the spot, which is that dorsal fin mounted tag, the acoustic tag, which is the one inserted into the body cavity, and then the PSAT tag, which is on the animal for about a year. So I wanted to do both horizontal and vertical movements, just to kind of see like if they were hotspot areas, what did their vertical movements look like if I had the tags that overlapped at that time. And so by my project, it was interesting to kind of see, we would see shifts in movements, like as waters were getting warmer, we saw from shelf movements to, off shelf movements where the waters got too warm along the outer banks and they moved off and they started doing these deeper dives and they were hitting cooler waters. So, not 100% sure what's going on with that, but it looked like some thermoregulatory behaviors. And so my master's was kind of, it created a jumping off point for so many questions. So again, I have so many questions myself, but it was a good point to just kind of see what's going on in the Carolinas and then use that as a basis to kind of dive deeper into like either localized areas or just the overwintering area as a whole.
No, there's been, I know in the news lately, there's been like a lot of news items about white sharks off of the Atlantic coast of Florida now, off I guess it was Jupiter. And a few other places. I know Florida a little bit, but they have, but it's kind of interesting. They people act like they're pretty surprised they didn't know white sharks were really out there is quite as abundant. And I guess even some guys have seen them diving and just have you seen the movement data? What shows them moving through the area? Are they hanging out in that area or?
So since my project didn't really focus on Florida in the overwintering portion per se, I don't have a whole lot of I don't know how much they're using it, but from the preliminary data that I've pulled and just looked at, I mean, they come all along in Florida. I mean, being in Florida is very common. There's some anecdotal data where there's fishermen off the Keys that have seen them when they're fishing for amberjack and they see these white sharks. I've seen them on Brub data all along the West Florida shelf. I've seen them, videos off of Jupiter. I know a couple of the sharks that were tagged by OSearch were off of Fernandina Beach in Jacksonville, right off the St. Mary's River area. So they utilize the Florida coast very often. And I know some people ask me, well, how have they always been here? Is this new? And I know as of 10 years ago, white sharks in Florida, I mean, for me, and I'm not sure for anyone else, was shocking. When I found out there was a shark, Catherine, from the OSearch group that popped up in the Gulf, and everyone was shocked that there was a white shark in Florida waters, especially the Gulf. And then over years, as I think, satellite telemetry has become more and more popular and a little more easier to obtain, or, the technologies have just improved. We've been able to see their movements more. So, I mean, there could have been some, migration shifts, but I feel like what we've seen that they have been here probably for a while.
Well, here's something where it helps know in the literature, because if you go back into the literature, there was a paper published in 1965 by one Eugenie Clark and a Catherine Schmidt, which you may be familiar with. And they had records of white sharks at that time off Florida. And if there's another guy, we've mentioned a few times, old timer Stu Springer, who was a long time, he was actually started out as a fisherman, then became quite well known in the shark world. But he asked Stu about it. Yeah, those white sharks are around there. They didn't know how common they were, but they would definitely see them in the fishery going back in the 50s and 60s at least. So that's the kind of information. I don't know if any of the agencies would have that kind of data somewhere.
I'm not sure. And I feel like that's kind of where those anecdotal, usually a lot of the fishermen were the ones that were seeing it. And since the internet is so new still, that information didn't get out like that. So a lot of people just didn't know if they weren't there, if they were on the water. So now, someone sees a white shark while spearfishing or diving, it's posted on the internet and it gets shared worldwide. So now now it's become so popular. So now everyone's like, oh, I guess white sharks are in Florida. And some people just still think it's shocking because they just don't expect to see what they would consider a cold water animal, which they prefer more, temperate, cooler waters, but they can, the waters off of Florida do get to those preferred temperature ranges.
Yeah, and they're probably moving it, like as you mentioned, they're probably moving at depth too, staying at a certain thermocline. I know, basking sharks were another one. They thought they were pretty rare to occur.
Yeah.
And now they know they go all the way down to Brazil and across the Atlantic and into the Gulf and all around the place. Those sharks definitely move around a lot more than people realize, because it used to be you'd see one here or there, and unless you knew somebody that talked about it. So it's this is the kind of thing I think is really cool. Like, it kind of your age starting out, a young person, you got these amazing technologies that certainly weren't available when I was starting out. We'd put in like a dart tag or sheep ear tag and then hope to God somebody caught one and called you about it.
Yeah, no, we are very fortunate nowadays. There's so much technology and so much that's available for us that just wasn't available even 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah, it's so rapidly changing, and then even like things with the internet now, you can do a lot more stuff. I'd say the biggest thing I noticed on the internet is because a lot of young people like you will go look for PDFs, but they only go back maybe 20, 30 years. If you want to get to the real older literature, like I mentioned, the Jeannie Clark paper from '65, you actually got to go to the library and get the book or do a library request or loan on it and stuff. And that's where I think some of the younger people got to go to the library and hint, just sort of FYI for you, and actually look at some of the books, because there is information there on from those things, but you just, unless they're done as a PDF, you have no idea that they were around, So
I think the libraries are getting a little bit better about scanning some of these older texts and older literature, and I've definitely have requested some. And it's in a PDF form, but you can tell that it's been like photocopied.
Right.
But it's just made it easier.
You can go to what is it? Andrew, help me out here. What is it? The Biodiversity Heritage Library Online, BHL? I know it's BHL, but you can go on there and you can put in these older references. And you can get them. You can get things from like 100, 150 years ago they scanned. And it's a really good, that's a really good, not just for Kenzie, but any of the young people listening out there, go online. Andrew's checking out exactly. I'm apologizing, I forget the name.
You're right. It's Biodiversity Heritage Library.
Yeah, go on there and you can. It's amazing resource there. You can find a lot of those older, literally things from 100 years ago that have been scanned as PDFs. And so that if you're looking for some old references that you can't find, that's an excellent resource. I use it all the time, so I can.
That's great. Yeah, that's definitely good to know. I'm gonna add that to my list of my references.
Yeah.
Some there are 1982, 1992, 1966.
Yeah. Oh, I've downloaded stuff from literally the early part of the 1900s, the late
1908.
Yeah.
For here.
I've downloaded some classic references there, and so you can go. That's where you can find some of those things there. And and just by the way, Andrew, I don't consider 1982 that old.
I was 4. What do you want me to do?
Yeah, I know. It's like I just trying to rub that in.
I was just reading all of the as I went down the list.
Yeah.
Hey.
So, okay.
1868.
There you go.
There we go.
Bingo.
We can all agree that that's old. Okay.
I won't reference Kenzie at all because she was even way before her time.
Yeah, we're not even going to mention that.
Yeah, we're not.
I'm a 90s baby.
You're a 90s baby. Yeah, exactly.
I don't like that. There's a point that we get in these podcasts. It's like, okay, we've done enough. We don't need to go that far.
That's fair.
Especially we got the people like Kenzie on there. If we got somebody older, more Andrew's age or mine, it's a little different. But we got these kids on here, so it's
I'm in my 30s, so I'm not.
There we go.
Yeah, there you go. So you're a kid. Trust me, you're still a kid.
Let me ask you this. When as you started to look at this data, you went and did some collections and but you had data, like a good data set, that can get a little, you have to be meticulous. You have to look at the data. Sometimes it's in good shape. Sometimes it's in rough shape. Was it a hard thing to take on? Was it in pretty good shape when you were able to use it, and were you able to use it to what you wanted to use it for in terms of answering the questions for your master's?
So the data that was given to me was at least it was very organized. However, when you're dealing with spot data, it's so infrequent. And then I have acoustic
Right.
data and I have PSAT data. Now all of those have to be analyzed very differently. So it was
Yeah.
a little overwhelming when I'm sitting there and I have this, external hard drive and I plug in and I see, 20, 40,000 detections. And I'm like, oh my gosh, where do I begin?
Yeah.
And not having really, I had some basic knowledge in R. I had never really used GIS, and I was in the middle of like taking a GIS course to hopefully use that. So it was a little
Right.
daunting when I was looking at it. So like the data itself was like organized really well, but then again, just trying to understand the data and figure out how to clean the data. Because I mean,
Yeah.
with like the spot tags, there's just certain detections that we just can't use because they don't have error messages, or there's like, I would say like false detections, meaning like, they might be just on land, or the coordinates were switched, or, it's showing somewhere in the Antarctica.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, clearly that's not where the shark is.
Yeah.
So just
a little bit of an outlier.
yeah. So being able to tease those outliers and figure out,
Yeah.
okay, how do I get rid of them, and how do I sort the data? And now, what packages to use in R, how am I going, where do I even begin? So
Yeah.
it was a lot of literature review, and then just reaching out to people who had worked with spot data and acoustic data. I started with those two first, and I just was trying to just get an idea of like, okay, first I need to clean the data. So I need to plot it and just see, what do I have to begin with?
Right.
What does it even
Right.
look like? And then seeing all the outliers or ones that just looked a little off. And then I did a lot of deep dive into literature like on GitHub, just trying to figure out R packages and reading on what these different packages do and how I could use it for those different tag data. And then just basically trial and error. It was a lot of experimenting where I would just plug in the data and just see if it worked. And it was a lot of R errors, R shutting down on me. It was, if anyone that's worked with R knows how frustrating it can be. And also, but when your R code works, the excitement that you feel,
It's like you won the lottery.
Yes. Yes. It is such a great feeling.
Well,
So I definitely had both.
Sorry, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean
Go
to
ahead.
interrupt. Go ahead.
I was just saying, I just had those highs and lows of just, errors to all of a sudden something works and you're like, all right, what did that even do?
Well, one thing I see like this pattern with you, like over like since you were young, as you talked about it with your parents being like, you had this like stubbornness about you to be like, no, I love these fish. I'm going to identify them. I'm going to prove you wrong. And then you go into, your lab and you're like, I want to volunteer in this lab, and I'll wait it out. I'll do whatever I need to do. Give me a list. I'll knock them out and do that. I feel like you almost have to have the same tenacity when you approach things like R and GIS. You have to have that stubbornness. Is like, no, I'm going to figure this out. As much as this is going to frustrate me, and as much as this is difficult and maybe overwhelming when you see all the data points and you're trying to tease it out, you don't know what's good, what's not. Did you find that actually help? Like, it seems like it's part of your personality, that determination, and just being like, no, you're not going to stop me. Like this soft piece of software, I've come too far. You're not going to stop me from figuring this out.
It definitely helped. There were definitely times where I had to, it was like 1 a.m. and I had been staring at R code for 8 hours, and I was like, you know what? We're just going to step away. Nothing productive is happening. We're just going to close the laptop. We'll save our spot and come back to it tomorrow. But yeah, it was a lot, and it was a lot of just, reaching out to, friends and colleagues that have worked with R, just asking them, hey, like, have you ever run into this error? Have you worked with like spot data before? What kind of, I guess, I just was just trying to use all of my resources and then just taking all that and then trying to apply it. But I think having a little bit of stubbornness, you kind of have to have that, because it's inevitably, even if you have R code that has been pre-written for you, it's inevitable something will not work at some point in that code. And you just have to be able to figure it out, and you just have to kind of just sit. And sometimes it's just you're missing a comma. It's something as simple as I'm missing a comma. And with GIS, it's the same thing. It's, you're learning a whole new program and software. I took additional courses. I use like Esri on, I use the YouTube. Esri has a great YouTube.
Yes, I do.
I looked at, other people that were just posting online. I would watch their videos. I took a Python class, so I kind of learned the back end of GIS to kind of learn more of the code. So at the same time, I was trying to learn R code, and then I was learning Python, And at work, we use SAS and SQL. So I was trying to learn 3 different coding languages at the same time, which I do not recommend because you start writing them in each other. So like I was writing R code in Python and SAS and R, and I was like, okay, we gotta like, we gotta figure this out.
Something's gotta happen here. We gotta separate.
Yeah.
Well, you learned a lot of good skills. I mean, that's what I always tell students: learn as many skills as you can, because that'll get you a job. And even in marine biology, that'll get you a job having those skill sets. But you could get a job in something else that might be a little more lucrative, but then you got to decide on what you want to do. It's more you're more passionate about. So anyway, so that's pretty good. So with all your skill set now, do you want to continue working on like doing some of these data, these different data? Now if you learned all these skills, you want to continue working on all this stuff, if hopefully for a PhD somewhere?
I do, yeah. So I said I'm just finishing up my master's. I defended about almost a month ago to the day. So I'm working on just some final edits to get that just final like stamp of completion. And then I'm looking at maybe a year to maximum 2 years, only to take some time off to really search for the right program. Obviously with funding right now, I do know that, things are a little bit harder. But I'm taking time to write. I said I have to turn my thesis into a manuscript. I have papers from work that I'm trying to write. I have my educational TikTok things. I'm trying to really foster that side of the educational. I like to put myself in like different mediums. And if it's either through like text educational resources or using social media, or doing podcasts like this, just trying to really hone in my skills was like a lot of the stuff is now more internet based, and it's definitely adding a new skill set. So I want to take some time to kind of just balance some things out. Like I had, my field stuff from my work, then I had data analysis for my master's, and now I really want to work on my writing. And I've been obviously writing all along, but I really want to either take some classes or just really focus on bringing that up to like a higher level. So, and then looking for a PhD. So in all this, I'll be, reaching out to advisors, and just seeing what projects are funded, what's available. I would like to continue some movement ecology, but I'm open to all projects. And yes, I've worked with white sharks, but I'm not stuck on that, even though I have so many questions with white sharks and I want to learn more. I'm not stuck on that species. I would love to work with anything. It doesn't have to be sharks. It could be fisheries. So I have experience in both fisheries and sharks. I would love to meld those two together if I could, because I think there's so much that could be intertwined and we can learn from one another.
I think one thing you mentioned, though, and too, this for just advice for you and any students listening out there, but if you're looking at a PhD program and you've done a master's, any publications you can get out, especially if your name's at the lead, that's going to help you, because a lot of professors for PhDs, they want to know, can you publish?
Yeah.
Because the whole publisher perishing. So anything you can do to get your first paper out. I think you got a paper out now, but you're not the lead on it now. So anything you can do to
I'm like a 3rd or 4th author. Yeah, it was a project I worked on at UNF, University of North Florida, with a friend of mine on her project.
Are you publishing it through the Global White Shark Conference they had? Are you trying to get a special?
I wanted to, but I just didn't have time to switch it over to like turn into the manuscript. I do have a friend of mine who I believe is doing. He also went to the conference with me, and he had finished his master's 2 years prior to mine, so he was doing a similar project. He was doing the acoustic data with the white sharks. I think he submitted for publication. I would have loved to, but it was kind of during the deadline. We just didn't have anything to really switch, because we were still trying to expand it into like the master's thesis and then trying to condense it at the same time. It was just too much, but I'm sad I missed it. But I'm hoping that now that I'm done, I say done with quotations, that I can slowly start kind of condensing that into a publication manuscript.
How was it going to the Global White Shark Conference? I assume that was probably your first major international conference.
Yeah, definitely my first international conference. It was amazing. I would say flying there was exhausting. I had flown to Australia before when I was 13 or 14. I forgot how long the flight from LAX to Sydney is. But because it was in Port Lincoln, which is kind of like South Central Australia. We flew into Sydney, and then it was LAX to Sydney, Sydney to Adelaide, and then Adelaide to Port Lincoln. And by the Port Lincoln flight, it was only 45 minutes. We were exhausted, and we flew in, and we got in, believe Sunday at midnight, and Monday was the first big day of the conference, but that was their poster session, and I was doing a poster.
Oh.
And so I show up, jet lagged and trying to pay attention. I'm trying to do this poster session. I'm so excited, but I'm running on just pure excitement and I don't drink caffeine, so there was nothing helping me except for just I'm excited to be in Australia. I'm excited to be here. It was a little painful, but I remember I was sitting there like my eyes were just closing as I was talking, and I'm like, I promise I'm so interested in this, and I promise this subject is exciting. I'm not putting myself to sleep. I promise you.
Yeah, you're almost hallucinating in a way because like you're so tired.
Who knows
I've been there. It's
yeah. Who knows if I was talking to anybody? There could have been nobody there.
You're on a wall. You're just talking.
I'm talking to a wall. But no, it was an amazing conference. It was all week long. I got to meet so many people from around the world, and we had different workshops, and we broke into different groups, and they paired us with our research areas. So they had the Atlantic group and the Pacific group, the South African group, the Australian group, the New Zealand group. There was another group there. And it was just so interesting as we were talking about, since we all knew about our population, hearing about the Mediterranean, hearing about the other populations and how well they're doing and what research they're doing, and the issues they've come up with, and it was just interesting to hear from a firsthand experience how these different researchers around the world are studying the species and how similar and how different the populations are. So it was a very interesting, and I think one of the best experiences I had in grad school was being able to go to that. Cool. And then we also got to go out and did some excursions. We did, went to the Neptune Islands. We did a cage dive. Unfortunately, when all the white shark scientists showed up, all the white sharks in the Neptune Islands left the area. So we didn't get to see one. So I was really sad, but I still got in the cage and I saw some fish. So it was my first time in a cage. So I got to experience it. And, how did
it feel?
I enjoyed it. I've
never done it before.
The water was very cold, so I felt like I had a brain freeze the entire time. So it was a little shocking getting in, but you get rocked around a little bit more than I expected. But once you're if you find a good spot, because we had a bunch of people in the cage too, that there was probably about 5 or 6 of us. It was one of those longer ones.
Okay.
Once you kind of get like a good spot, you're good. I crouched down. If I stood up, I was too close to the surface. So I was kind of getting rocked around a little bit much. And like there were the waves and the bubbles were just too much in my face. So once I leaned down and I just kind of squatted down in the corner, it was great. I mean, the water was crystal clear. It was beautiful. There was tons of large fish that were around. I mean, I just sat there and I enjoyed it. And they basically had to pull me out. They're like, all right, the next group has to go. It's time.
You're just like, I don't want to leave. I
don't want to leave.
I want to find one.
Yeah.
Well, I bet you if you went swimming outside the cage, somebody would show up. That would have been.
That's how it would be. Yeah. But it was funny. So we did a week there for the conference, and then my friends and I, we stayed an extra week to explore. We went up the East Coast. We had to fly back into Port Lincoln. The day we showed up to fly back out, I followed them on social media. They said they spotted their first white shark. So they all left the day we showed up, and they all come back the day we leave. It's like they knew a bunch of white shark scientists were coming in. They're like, I want to stay far away from these people.
You are not going to study me. There's no way you are going to study me.
Yeah,
that's really great. You had such a good experience there and met a lot of people. So I want to ask you about your talking about you getting involved with the social media and your stuff. And I know nothing about TikTok, but why don't you tell us about tell everybody else that probably who knows about TikTok, but what you've set up on there.
So I decided to start a channel. It was one of those things where when I'm out with friends or family, I'm always like, hey, fun fact. I've learned so much and I love to learn, but I'm always the one just talking about fun facts, or we're out in an aquarium and I'm the one giving a full lecture on what we're seeing in the tank. And I was like, why don't I just make this a channel? And it also give me exposure to one, talking to a camera, because I will say it's a little awkward when you have a phone and you're talking to yourself. And you don't have an audience, you don't have someone to kind of feed off of, like their expressions, and, there's no questions. It's just you talking to a camera. So it was a little interesting learning curve to kind of figure that out. But I just really wanted to get information out there. There's obviously a lot of misinformation on the internet. And especially with sharks, my channel is all marine science. I definitely am more shark heavy because that's kind of where I know the most. But I do all marine science stuff, and I just try to get it to a wide audience, kids, adults. I want to just be able to help take what we read in all these papers, like we have access to all these scientific articles and journals, and anytime a new paper pops up, we're the ones reading it and we know what's going on, but that doesn't usually translate to the general public, or there's a major delay. And so part of me wants to kind of help bridge that gap and just make it accessible and make it fun. And I see a lot of people misidentifying sharks. I'll scroll through these videos on TikToks, and there'll be, a bull shark, and everyone's saying it's everything but a bull shark. And also, there's a hammerhead, and it's everything. So I want to present these tools and resources and show people, this is how you can learn more about it. This is, how you ID these sharks. It's just trying to make it fun and accessible so that when people are going out and going fishing, or when they see something in the wild, that they know it, or they know how to figure it out. A lot of times they might not know what resources are there for them to look these things up. Because there's just so much out there, and the internet can be a confusing, overwhelming place if you don't know where to look. So my TikTok was more of just me wanting to have fun, talk about topics that I love, and then just spread some educational content to people and hope that they learn something from it. And I don't have a large following, and that's okay. I'm not there for a following. It's just, if one person, learns something new, or I inspire one person, or one person just goes, wow, actually, this is really interesting, and they go and they learn more about it and they start researching things, then I've done my job. And I feel like as a scientist, part of my job is to be an educator. And I feel like that's where this TikTok or social media side comes in. It's just me bridging that gap and getting what us scientists see every day to like the general public.
Yeah. Well, I see like you almost have 1,000 followers here. So the way I always look at it is if you put 1,000 people in a room, that's a pretty big lecture hall, to speak to it, if you think about it. So you should be proud of that. I think it's wonderful. I'm a big fan of your videos. And it's fun. I know how much work goes into it, and it's not easy to do. But definitely check her out. It's at Ken Seas. It's KEN.C or SEAS. So it's a little play on words. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
So we see, so you got all this going on, all these activity, and we know your short-term goal, you're looking into PhD programs, and please consider, if you're out there looking for a great PhD student, hit up Kenzie if you want. You can contact her directly, or you can go through Andrew and I. We'll definitely connect you with her and stuff.
Absolutely.
So beyond your PhD, where do you see yourself, like, say, in 20 years from now?
So this has changed over time. For a long time, it was, working for NOAA, but as we know recently, that has been much more difficult. But I always go back to teaching. I really like academia, and it's a very daunting goal in a sense to, be in charge of a lab and looking for grants and teaching students. But I have gotten so much out of the education side of things, and I feel like it's just meshing the two that I've always, I love the education side and I love the research side. And I've had I've had really good experience with some advisors, and I've seen how good supportive advisors really can foster like students and successful students. And I would love to just be a part of that. I would love to continue to promote, more, just more accessible, more, fun science. I know a lot of people get discouraged, and, the job, this field does not pay very well in a sense. It is very difficult, and there's a lot of people that do deter you. And there was a few people in my life that were always supportive and were great mentors to me. And I feel like, yes, I was stubborn, but they really made the difference in my life. Mm. And just those few individuals, even if it was someone like saying, hey, like, it's going to be hard, but if you really want it, you can do it. And I'm here to help you in any way I can. And even if I could just be that for one student, that would be amazing. And that's my goal, is to strive to be the mentor that I've had, or that I would, would want to have. So that's kind of where I want to take it, is definitely having my own lab, going into academia, and just really helping foster students and successful students.
Yeah. Well, we definitely have to really thank you for coming on the show. And we'll definitely have to have you back sometime once you get into your PhD program. Hint, hint, anybody listening out there. And, and you'll have to have to update us on how it's going, especially if you're doing sharks, any of the sharks, and whether it's white sharks or something else, some other species. It'd be interesting to follow your career to see how you're doing, Kenzie. But thank you so much for coming on here and sharing your story about your journey so far. And we wish you all the best going forward.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. It was a blast being on here.
Thank you, Kenzie, for joining us on today's episode of the Beyond Jaws podcast. It was great to have you on. Dave, what were the parts that you really thought that really stuck with you in this interview?
I thought just some of the stuff we got off a little bit on talking about some of the resources and stuff. You talk about white sharks off Florida and how people thought they were really rare and unusual, and they finding out they were there more frequently. And then that kind of led to a discussion on, research and literature and stuff like that. And we mentioned, brought up the whole thing about the biodiversity heritage library, which has a lot of really older references and stuff, which for young people out there listening, that's a very good resource to do. And I thought we all learned something today from just some of the different topics we talked on. Talking about the white shark she was tracking and how they're more common off Florida, and some of the early stuff we did, and then just sort of different aspects of her career, how she's kind of taking gap years as she's gone along. And I think there's some merit to doing that, because you may not be 100% what you want to do, but taking some time off and figuring out, I think it makes you a better student when you go back to grad school to pursue it.
Right.
I think her taking some time to really adjust as to what she wants to do for a PhD.
Yep.
is really good. It's good advice.
Yeah, it's a smart move. It's the move that I think that you have to make. PhD, you really specialize in something. You're going to be known for that. You're going to be the expert in that topic that you choose. And I think it's good to understand where you want to go, and this is going to be your future, depending on the species you choose or the topic you choose. This is going to be your future. So you want to make sure that you make the right decision on it, or a decision that is good for you. And that's the right decision. And that's what she's kind of hoping to do, and exploring in the different avenues of what she's doing. Because right now she's a fisheries biologist. She did her master's in great white, distribution ecology. And so who knows what's next for her, and what questions she wants to answer in terms of her research.
And I think a lot of things that came through too is a lot of different skills she's picked up, sets. And we talk about, I've talked about a lot of times about, I tell students, learn skills, the more skills you learn, the better off you are. And so that's really good. Things I always hit on about, just public speaking at conferences or doing publishing are really important to get done. That'll help you out immensely. And we talked a little bit about the white shark conference she attended too, which was really good to be able to, other than she didn't get to see any white sharks diving in the cage, but other than that, she had a really good thing. But, she's another one of these young up and comers that, we've had a few of them on. We try to have them on to get the thing from the older, more senior people and the young people. And it's going to be great to see how her career trajectory goes from here on over the next 10, 20 years and stuff.
Yeah.
And hopefully it'll always live on the web, and so she can come back and see how she sounded back in 2025 with the guys. So,
well, I think it's what's important too is when we talk about the guests that we have on, we always try and get a full representation of the shark scientists that are out there now, and that are what, depending on where they are in their lives, where they're living, where they came from. And trying to be able to succeed in shark science in their own right, certain questions that need to be answered, certain topics that want to be to be discovered, new species they want to learn about, and so forth. This is not an easy thing to get into. This is not an easy path, and so to get that diversity of age groups, diversity of people, we've been able to hit a lot of different countries, people from different countries, young and old, in those countries, and to be able to say, hey, what's it like? Because a lot of times we don't have that experience, we don't know that knowledge, and so we're getting it from a lot of different people, and they're all different. Nothing is a straight path; it's all meandering, and I think that's what's interesting about it. But I feel like when we have people like Kenzie, like Aaliyah on, I think we start to see how this younger generation is getting on in terms of finding jobs and what they want to do and where they want to explore. And we'll have more young people on from all over, not only the US, but from all over the world to get their experience, we had Adriana as well, who was on too. And so we're getting all these experiences, and it's kind of interesting to me and to you, I'm sure, how people are figuring out their paths. And I think that's an important aspect when it comes to shark science, and people listening to this to be like, oh, okay, so this is one way of doing it. This speaks to me the most. I'm gonna try this one.
And I think where somebody is kind of later in their career, mid-career, or just starting out, almost everyone has a similar, nothing's linear. There's no straight trajectory. No. Almost everybody we've had, I can't think of any exceptions, did their career took them in all kinds of directions before they were able to get on the path they eventually took them there. And I think a lot of it too is it's having a lot of focus. I always talk about this in my presentations, but focus, a lot of drive, and then persistence. Mm-hmm. Kenzie certainly has that. She's really clear what she wants to do, and she goes after it. And that's kind of how you have to be in this field.
Agreed.
And, I think you'll find those qualities in almost anybody we've had on the show that's persisted in the field.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was great to have Kenzie on. Kenzie, thank you so much. We're going to put all of your socials on here that you want to share so people can watch your TikToks and any other videos and content that you put out. And Dave, if people want to get a hold of you, how would they do so?
It's Lost Shark Guy on Instagram, but go to my YouTube channel, Lost Shark Guy, and catch up on the new series, Searching for Lost Sharks, Extinct or Alive. You can hit me up there. And then, of course, on our YouTube channel, Beyond Jaws Podcast. You can catch Andrew and I there. So those are probably the main ways to get a hold of me, and Andrew as well. So,
absolutely. Thank you again for joining us, Kenzie and Dave. It's always a pleasure. And for you guys, the audience, thank you so much for joining us on today's episode of the Beyond Jaws podcast. From Dave and I, we want to thank you very, very much, and have a great day and happy conservation.